Let me go ahead now and introduce our two civility experts. Dr. John C. Green is Director Emeritus of the Ray C. Bliss Institute of Applied Politics. His more than 30 years of service at the University of Akron includes time as interim president of the university, dean and interim dean of Oakdale College of Arts and Sciences, vice dean for liberal arts, chair of the Department of Political Science, and interim chair for 5 other departments. He is also a senior research advisor to the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life, and a political scholar whose insights are frequently reported by national newspapers and major broadcasters, as well as state and local news outlets. His published works includes 9 books, 32 edited books, 39 refereed journals, and 120 other scholarly and popular publications. He received his PhD from Cornell University and a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Colorado. Now let me introduce Mr. Ted Wetzel. Ted is a self-described regular guy who collaborated with 18 other regular Americans to produce a book entitled Is America Broken?, which will be the focus of our discussion today. Ted considers himself very fortunate and blessed. He's been married 36 years to Renee. They raised 3 adult children and recently welcomed a first grandchild. So congratulations, Ted. That's wonderful. And 2 granddogs. Ted benefited from great health care, being treated for 3 heart attacks. He recommends near-death experiences for everyone. Guess that helps with the civility too. In retrospect, Ted considers himself blessed with mild adult ADD, which spawned a change of careers every decade or so, including everyday pursuits such as, and I'll list some of his careers here, journalism, sanitation, manufacturing engineering, technical sales, marketing, executive management, small business ownership, and even found time to do a little bit of Little League baseball coaching as well. And since the spring of 2018, Ted has been on a sabbatical to study Divided America. So Ted is a bit of a generalist, but he invites experts along to flip over puzzle pieces with him. Politically, Ted leans left on some issues, right on others, and centrist on others. So it turns out that being a moderate was helpful for this book project that he's embarked on. Spiritually, Ted was raised in a devout Roman Catholic family, one of 7 children. Spiritually, he considers himself simply loved by God. And it makes sense to Ted that God would strive to be revealed to many different people at different periods in history in the various ways that they could understand. So I'm now going to turn over the conversation to Dr. Green and Ted Wetzel for some conversation before we take questions from the audience. Dr. Green and Ted?
Thank you, Matt.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. And I appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon. And Ted, thank you for being with us.
Wonderful to be with you, John. Thank you. And thank you for encouraging me along the way, finding my way to the civility. What was it? When you were forming the civility part of the Bliss Center about 2 years ago.
Right, and it's been really fun talking with you. But I want to ask you a question to begin our conversation. What would you say is the main point of your book, Is America Broken?
Yeah, John, I would say maybe there's 3 main points of the book. The first main point would be, again, this is written from regular Americans to regular everyday Americans. I got into the book because I was wondering, geez, oh man, are we doomed? Like, are we falling off a cliff here? So the first message of the book is we are not doomed. The second message of the book turns out to be we can understand divided America. It's going to take more than a 30-second soundbite news program, but we can understand this. And the third message is there are actions already underway that we can choose from to actually make a difference as we the people. So those, I would say, 3 messages.
thank you. You mentioned the book was a collaborative effort between you and 18 other ordinary Americans. About writing the book with all those collaborators?
Well, truly, the book would have been terrible if I had not had collaborators. They were all very enlightening and kept me from going over cliffs. So it's also kind of interesting, especially for Akronites. The first person I told about pursuing this project was Father Norm Douglas, a pillar of Akron, and he suggested if I'm going to pursue such a thing about politics, given that I knew nothing about politics, I should maybe talk to Bill Lyons at the University of Akron. So Bill was my second stop, and Bill gave some very sage advice. And Bill said, "Ted, it's a very noble thing. It's not," he didn't say it, I'm paraphrasing. We really, don't need another white savior. It would be really good if we got like a really cross-functional team together to work on this. So I thank Bill Lyons every chance I get. Oh, but to answer your question more thoroughly, John, the process was more of an interviewing process until we had something on paper, of which I wrote 99% of what's on paper. And then it was very excellent input from everyone who read different drafts of the book.
Well, Ted, what are some practical, concrete steps that ordinary Americans can take to address the divisions that we encounter, in our society, but also?
Whoops, you broke up, John. I'll take it with the practical steps.
Yeah, my question is, take.
Whoops. John, I didn't hear the question, sorry. You may want to turn off your video and your sound quality might improve.
So what are steps that you would advise that people can use to reduce conflict?
Oh, well, that is the $64 million question, isn't it? As it turns out, there's no good answer, frankly. There's no good answer. I would start with reading the book and watching our videos. One place it starts with is protecting our own serenity, our personal serenity. There's a friend of mine, I've made a new friend. His name is Richard Gillette. He is a psychologist, psychiatrist, and he similarly was frustrated like I. And he wrote a book, and he and I discuss it regularly. His book comes from personal psychology background. And the name of his book is It's a Freaking Mess. And the whole point of his book is to take care of yourself and then build from there. Because right now, the system is rather rigged. And it is very, very difficult to have concrete conversations that can go anywhere inside of a rigged system. There's also a lot of progress being made on unrigging the system, and I hope we'll have some time to talk about the 5 grassroots areas a little bit later. but those are outlined in the book as the final of 11 steps. We go through 11 steps. The first 4 steps talk about the brokenness of America, that it is. Is America broken? Yes, it is broken. We can do something about it, though.
You know, Ted, one of the things I've always admired about talking to you is you have a more positive view of conflict than most people. Could you tell us a little bit about your idea that conflict is the fuel that can lead us to a better society?
Sure, John, thanks. Yes. So the Harvard Happiness Study has been going on for 80 years. And what they have found is that once we take care of the basic Maslow needs, and by the way, not be addicted to a chemical and have a decent education, the thing that makes people happy is relationships. And so nurturing relationships turns out to be the way, primo way to really step up our personal happiness. Now, normally, we would say that having a conflict would be something to be avoided. But if we didn't disagree on anything, that would be like 2 people out of the same pod. And it is actually where we run into conflict that we have an opportunity to learn about each other, to be inquisitive. And so it does seem to me there is a lot of leverage in America to develop a culture of resolving conflict and happily looking forward to conflict as an opportunity to learn about each other. After all, only less than 1% of us are sociopathic. So to avoid conflict is, and to blame people, even worse than avoiding conflict, is really not even like very rational when you think about the 1% rule.
Ted, tell us a little bit about the grassroots strategies that you and your collaborators include in your book.
Sure. So what we discovered, and it took quite a while to start to discover these things, was that there are people just like us. When you look at 330 million people in America, that's 330 million people that are thinking, right? And a lot of them are thinking about what's going on, like me, and like everyone on this call. And the very odd thing was, John, that it was a full 11 months, maybe 13 months before I started becoming aware that there was even these grassroots areas available. So one of the secrets in the book, we call that there's 11 secrets, and not secrets because they're withheld maliciously. It's just that they're not very obvious. And so the 11th and final secret is that there are well over 100, probably over 200 organizations already hard at work, working in basically 5 grassroots areas. And the way that we decided to label them as 5 grassroots areas is we ended up taking a collection of about 150 of these organizations. And we said, oh, look at this one's doing that. This one's doing that. Oh, this one's doing that. And it ended up in five grassroots areas. If we have time, maybe we can talk about those. But the number 1 grassroots area is basically bringing back civics into our life. One of the findings that we had was that we, the people, became so successful, oddly enough, that we became great consumers and kind of crappy citizens. And so if we have three branches of government, executive, legislative, judicial, and as Thomas Jefferson is quoted as saying, we, the people, are supposed to be the foundation of that three branches of government. Well, we became kind of a weak foundation because we kind of checked out with a lot of other interests, from working a lot of hours to flat screens, and now our phones, advertising, entertainment. And so the number one area of grassroots is bringing back civics to American culture. And that can start with kindergarten all the way through what we're doing here on this call, which is like educating us as adults of how we can get civically engaged. So that one grassroots area is an expectation of all Americans. The other four grassroots areas are very small percentages of Americans, 1 or 2% of Americans, so that we don't have to be consumed with being civically aware citizens. We can take little sabbaticals or a period of service to serve your country. One thing we talk about in the book also is that the people who serve our country, the 2%ers in our military, wow, we are quite good at thanking them. But the thing that we questioned in the book was, what are the other 98% of us doing? And that was the thing that tipped me over the edge too. Sorry, this is going into a little bit of a ramble, but the thing that triggered me at the age of 56 a couple of years ago was thinking about the John F. Kennedy quote of, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Well, for 56 years, the country was doing really good things for Ted Wetzel. And the question started to become, what can I do? And that's when I said, what would a regular guy find out if he asked the question, is America broken? What's going on here? I ramble, John.
No, it's fine, Ted. This is really great. But could you, to make this just a little more concrete, could you describe one of those groups that's engaged in civics at the grassroots?
Sure. So one of the groups, and the one that's, I'll talk about two that are perhaps three that are perhaps becoming household names. I say that tongue in cheek because they're probably far from being household names. One would be Citizen University, started by Eric Liu in Seattle, Washington. Citizen University. So you can kind of Google it and check it out. I think Eric Liu's been at this for, if not 5 years, 10 years. Online education for back to civics, The two other names that come to mind that have been doing this for 5 and 10 years, one would be, it used to be called Better Angels, named after the Abraham Lincoln, term for bring out your better angels. They changed their name to Braver Angels. You can find them online also. And what they do is bring people together to talk about inside people's homes. They're very good about bringing proverbial blue people and red people together to talk. And they have techniques that they've developed. Similarly, there's an organization called Living Room Conversations. And they have on their website, if you go to Living Room Conversations, they have 120 topical discussion guides, 1-pagers, maybe 2-pagers, 120 topics that people can sign up for to talk about things, to build relationships that just so happen to be around issues of conflict. So those are like 3 examples of this civics area. I would like to mention now, though, that let's take the second grassroots area. The second grassroots area is specifically about unrigging elections. So in that area, it's very specific about changing election laws, dark money, gerrymandering, considering term limits again, ranked choice voting, and some other creative ideas to basically take the accumulated power of big money out of elections and put power back in the hands of we, the people, for elections.
So just to be complete here, you mentioned 2 of the 5 areas. What are the 3?
The third one is actually quite passionate for me. Perhaps the best way to talk about the third is the voice of the people. And actually, I know that, John, you have experience in this area, in particular with what you do through the Bliss Center and the political science, the deliberative democracy, that I know only a little about what you guys have done in Akron. But through the Jefferson Center in Minnesota, I know you guys are a satellite of the Jefferson Center. So I'm sorry, this third area is voice of the people. So if one way that I like to think about it is if we consider ourselves that we hire people through elections, we hire them, we give them this responsibility, this job, they asked for it. The question that came to the surface as the 18 of us worked on this was, are we good bosses for these people? Do we have really a voice of the people? And this also turns out to be one of the kind of run amok things at this period of time. Our 2-party system is not functioning as a voice. The 2-party system is functioning in these silos. And so the voice of the people, the accumulated voice of the people, is very hard to hear right now. And so these techniques of deliberative democracy, I've learned, John, people like you have been developing these things for 30 years. And they're being used in a lot of places. And again, almost no one knows about these techniques. The fourth area is like new developments, fresh off the presses, new developments. So one that's easy to talk about is that news has become so polarizing. So how do we generate news that is more unifying? Another idea that's in this fourth category of grassroots, which is innovation. So this fourth innovation area, the idea of a citizens portal is getting a lot of airtime amongst the people who talk about these sort of things. Again, isn't it so easy for us to imagine a portal? But there's people talking about this. And again, this relates to voice of the people. It you can see how the portal can tie this all together. The fifth and final area of grassroots is developing future representatives so that they are, steeped in listening to the people. Again, our founders, right? I'm preaching to the choir, I know that, but it occurred to me after, several months into this, oh my God, our founders built the whole system to avoid accumulating power. And so this fifth area of grassroots is basically, how do we develop future leaders that are going to be very sensitive to accumulation of power and very sensitive to putting the power into the voice of the people. So those are the 5 areas.
Well, thank you, Ted. Before we turn to some questions from our audience, which has been very patient, tell us, how can people get a copy of Is America Broken?
Sure. Best way is to go to our website, Fighting to Understand with dashes between the words, fightingtounderstand.us. So on our website, you will be directed to places that you can purchase the ebook, all the traditional places, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon. And then there's also a place on there that you can make your own donation from $1 to $1 million. We will be happy to send you a paperback book with any donation. Oh, I should also say that the on our website, the area that talks about the book and beyond. So this is an evolving, the whole story is evolving. Of course, America's evolving. Freedom is evolving. So our website is evolving also. Anyway, there's an area there that you can find videos. So in addition to writing the book, we ended up making probably 20 videos now that take things in little segments so that it's easier to digest. Again, this is, for everyday American, from everyday Americans for everyday Americans. And videos are very compelling. Thanks for asking though, John. We hope that this speaks to a lot of people.
Well, thank you very much, Ted. Matt, let's turn back to you for some questions from the audience.
Sure. I wanted to thank both you and Ted for that very nice conversation. I know it spurred a lot of thoughts, and we've got a number of questions here from our audience. One of the things, though, just to kind of start this out, since Ted did talk about his website, I would like to plug, well, obviously his book is excellent, but his website also has a tremendous amount of resources, and those are available. I just watched one of the videos prior to our call today. So one of the things, Ted, just to start out with, as you know, the title of this little talk today was had to do with the election and Thanksgiving dinner. Trying to be a little lighthearted as we look towards Thanksgiving, and we've had this this contentious election season, and now we're having a Thanksgiving that people may or may not be celebrating with family and friends due to COVID and everything. But are there any resources that you would recommend, either off your website or anywhere else, that people might consult this week, as they kind of anticipate gathering for Thanksgiving, again, whether in person or virtually with family and friends who, may have a different political opinion or just opinions in general that don't mesh. And, you've talked about how conflict can be healthy, and Do you have any resources or advice for people, specifically this week, as they, kind of look back to the election and look forward to Thanksgiving dinner?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And to live up to our billing, Matt, we owe an answer to that question, right? So I'm going to ramble as I'm pretty good at now and then. It just so happens that my daughter called me yesterday with this very same question. She's was in a kind of found herself in this loggerhead sort of, and she might end up to dinner with this person, right? So it's like, how do I get out of this, Dad? Her knowing what I'm working on, of course. Well, so we talked about it, and where we arrived at was, so I recommend this to everyone. Just admit to yourselves that we are in a place where media bubbles exist and polarized politics, and we're set up for failure, folks. So our relationship is just too important. This too is going to pass. And how about we talk about something that we can actually have fun about? And if your family is sort of a game playing family, then I would say head for the games. But there are definitely resources on our website. Is what we call easy starter steps. So that's one place to focus. I think certainly if you Google right now, I haven't tried this, but if you Googled, Thanksgiving conversation saving or something, save Thanksgiving conversation, you'll find something out there, I think, too. I think just, admitting that, and if you really want to still talk politics, then maybe talk about getting creative, say, what would we do if we were president or we were the mayor of Akron to bring people together? How do we create trust in an environment that is so distrustful right now? That's a really $64 million question.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think sometimes we're very quick to criticize others, and I find, at least for myself, just putting myself in someone else's shoes can sometimes, in trying to understand why they believe the way they do or feel the way they do, that can also help a little bit.
The other thing that comes to mind, Matt, just kicking it back and forth here, you and I. Hopefully there's some old timers at dinner. So this is a great time to dig into the old timers and say, hey, tell us about the time when Nixon was impeached. How did that go down? Or tell us about the time when rioting was going on. How did you guys get through that? And we could all use to tell more stories.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I want to turn to some of the questions that are appearing in chat now. I know, Ted, that in this conversation, you did make reference to the system being rigged. In reading your book and listening to some of your videos, I've come across that view as well. One of our audience members would just like a little bit more explanation on that. What do you mean by the system is rigged?
Sure. So let me wrap my head around this. It's one of those things that is difficult until you see it, and then it's like, oh, that's obvious. So again, kind of the fatal flaw, if we want to call it a fatal flaw of being human, is that yes, we are made in the image of God. Almost every religion says that, but we are not gods. So we are prone to, in particular, power. And, I'm going to misquote this, but what is it? Absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So again, our founders built this checks and balances and this whole system to avoid accumulation of power. And along our 245-year history, people have time and again tried to exert power. I mean, it's just normal. So when we say the system is rigged, what we mean is that it's rigged towards those with power. Typically, that would be especially money power. So big money can, what do we say? We have the best government money can buy, is kind of the quip. And certainly that's not always true. And in the book, we go out of our way, and in the videos, we go out of our way to say that capitalism is wonderful. And capitalism is wonderful until it's not wonderful, until it gets out of balance. Okay, so we're not trying to vilify money is the point. But the other area that power is accumulated is in families, right? So the Bush family, and I'm not saying that they're evil. The Clinton family, the Trump family. So what happens when we accumulate power? And in this case, we got the three branches of government and the foundation of we the people that for many of us, not all, but for many of us, we've checked out. We're no longer really the foundation of that. And, again, I don't mean to oversimplify it, but nature abhors a vacuum. And so what rushes into that vacuum? Well, you've got things like, just entertainment business and big money and party politics. And so those things, there's a very big disconnect between performing as an elected person and being reelected. Oh, so by the way, I would like to throw one other reference point out there, Matt, and for the listeners. There's two places in the book I reference Harvard. One is the happiness study. The other one is Harvard report and study written by Catherine Gell and Michael Porter. And again, I was introduced to that study only 16 months into the research that I was doing. So either I was looking in the wrong places or it's just hard to find this information. It's all becoming more and more available now. But the report by Catherine Gell and Michael Porter is, I believe the title is How Politics is Failing America, something along those lines.
Yeah, Ted, you've talked about power, and I think it relates to another question here that we have in the chat related to media. And this question, I'll read part of it here. When it comes to civility, what role or responsibility do individuals have as consumers of media? And conversely, what role and responsibility does the media have in assisting civil discourse?
Yep, I like that question a lot. This may not be a popular answer, but here's the way that I arrive at it. Yes, we are all responsible. You mentioned in the write-up about my background, I was raised Roman Catholic. So, and I happen to think Jesus is a pretty cool dude. And the thing that pissed off Jesus the most was not like people sinning, not like people playing with their iPhone, but the leaders who produce those things. And I don't mean manufacture, it's like, maybe I say it this way. If we know that social media is not good for our children, then it seems to me that the people who continue to give our children social media that's bad, that's destructive to them, is like putting cigarettes in their hands, right? We wouldn't allow them to have cigarettes. So would we allow them to have social media? So I also think that's, as an inventor myself of things like when I was doing engineering work, the people who invented social media, I believe, were not evil people. They intended well. But I do put the burden on the providers of those technologies. And yes, we as individuals ideally would find a way to use them less, or find ways to use them for the good. I hope I answered that.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, Ted, is there, I mean, have you thought about ways to harness social media specifically? Because in one sense, we talk about media, social media is very democratic today, in the sense that all of us can, participate on various social media platforms. But have you thought about ways to harness that for lack of a better word, a pro-civility message? And I've been thinking about this especially because, going back to what you said earlier, I do believe that relationships are at the center of civility, at developing relationships with people, developing trust, being able to agree, disagree with someone and trust is a lot different than, some faceless person online, right? But in this age of COVID, social isolation and everything, is there well, I guess I'll just ask an open-ended question here. Is there a positive way that social media can contribute to civility?
Emphatic, yes. I think it's inevitable. We're just coming through, again, this is just my opinion right now, we're coming through this period where we're learning about perhaps how social media was misused. So I would point perhaps to two websites that people could go to if they want to jot it down. And of course, you can just send me an email through my own website if you want to chat about any of this stuff. So two that come to mind right now. One is called pol.is, POL.is. I'm just blown away by these people's creativity of how they use social interaction over the internet to do democratic things. Fascinating work that they're doing. The second one that I just discovered last week, so this is the other thing that is just fascinating to me. It's like a discovery every week working on in this area. It makes me feel small, but it makes like the problem seem a lot smaller. Is openmindplatform.org. This was co-founded by Jonathan Haidt. Jonathan Haidt is a social. He's a what's Jonathan Haidt? Moral psychology, I think, is what his specialty is. And I forget what university. I think out of New York City somewhere. He wrote a quite popular book, which I highly recommend, called The Righteous Mind. And so my shorter answer is yes, social media will be used for the good. It already is starting to be. And we have to be careful about the bad.
Great. We have another question here. I think it's a compliment to you as well. But how have you learned to become a better, more thoughtful listener? Which I think the person saying this is obviously considers you that. And when we're involved in conversations, especially those difficult conversations, how do we actually listen to the person rather than spend time crafting our own argument?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the credit that I'm given here. I'm not sure I deserve it all. If I had to boil it down to one word, it would be curiosity. And I'm trying to think, when do I get tripped up on wanting to be right? So there's a little saying in couples therapy that I'm very fond of. And the saying is, it's your choice, Ted. You can either have a relationship or you can be right. And so, if I get hung up on being right, I could be sacrificing the relationship, And so I am a pretty good listener. I have to admit, I'll take a little credit for that, except perhaps with the people that are closest to me. So that's unfortunate truth. In other words, ask my wife, and you might get a little different answer. Curiosity.
Yeah, we have a follow-up question that, or at least fits very well with what we were just discussing. Let me jump to that one. Sure. Again, you get a compliment here. Ted's loving, respectful curiosity makes him very special. Unfortunately, these aren't common traits, which complicates solutions. Those who are less likely to listen are more likely to think that they have answers, to monopolize the conversation. Might they think this conversation to be rigged against them? I have a friend who said, when can I just tell people they're wrong? So how do we make a respectful session attractive to those who think such conversations a waste?
Yeah, love it. Yeah, these are all great questions. Okay, and they all deserve their own ramble, right? So I'm also fond. Oh, by the way, I should have admitted this earlier. Jesus, clear. At least 99% of what comes out of my mouth is plagiarized. That's what makes me a researcher, right? So I try not to take credit for any of this. Okay, so someone is credited for saying, in essentials, unity; in non-essentials, liberty; in all things, charity. So I am hopeful that the question is a good one. We do not need to agree on everything. And we don't need to agree on much at all, really. And I'm curious to start having conversations. We're actually trying to have these conversations now. Are there common beliefs, common values in America? And how many can we come up with? So, and I don't mean to oversimplify it, because it's where it's where many of us get tripped up, is in thinking that there's something great about being right. It's really a tough one.
I like what you had said earlier, Ted, about not having to be right. I think that goes a long way in some of those conversations, and not cutting someone off either right at the beginning because they might say something with which you disagree or others disagree, and allowing some conversation out there. I do worry a little bit today. I think people often will cut others off, or not explore a topic of conversation, or at least listen. And again, I think that listening is often equated with agreeing, and at least I think, I'm asking you more for this, but I would disagree with that definition. I don't think listening to someone is agreeing with them, and I would rather that they talk about the way that they truly feel, even if it's uncomfortable or not popular. rather than try to cut them off, sweep things under the rug, because I don't think that's healthy for civility, but or healthy for us. But I would agree, I think, with you that it's extremely difficult. It's not an easy answer. It's not something we're going to settle in the next couple of minutes here. But I think that listening is part of it.
Yeah, you definitely did. Two other things came to mind again that I plagiarized, but you brought them to the surface, Matt. One is that I just learned this in the last 2 weeks. Again, I just cannot stress enough how much there is to harvest here. We often fight about things that are actually polarities, meaning they're the same side of or they're different sides of the same coin. So, for example, left-leaning people, liberal people, they tend to focus more on self-expression. And conservative people tend to focus on self-control. And like, if any one of them said that they were 100% right, it would just be a terrible world if it was all self-expression or all self-control, you know? So we need both. Yeah, and as a culture, we've lost some of our sharpness of relationships, you know, and maybe that's a little too much flat screen time. I have to say though, there is some good stuff on TV that makes me think about relationships. So I know it can be done better. You know, it doesn't have to be all blazing guns. Sorry, I digress.
No, we've just got a couple of questions here, Ted, that kind of deal with the issue of kind of what we share or don't share today. So let me read one of these and get your response here. Do you believe that a deterioration of shared values and culture is partly or largely to blame for the deterioration in our public discourse?
I guess I haven't been asked that question in quite that way. I think it's not so much the absence of the values, but it's the absence of talking about the values. So, for example, on our website and in the book, we talk about 7 ground rules. So the 7 ground rules were sort of created as just guardrails, you know? You can jump over the guardrails if you want, but these are guardrails. The important thing about the ground rules or the guardrails is not in like being perfect, like never touch the ground rules or never touch the guardrails, but that we talk about them. And so I hope that helps. I don't know that we've got, you know, from 1% sociopathic population to all of a sudden 10% sociopathic population. I don't think that at all. I think we just don't talk about it. We don't talk about our values. That's.
Well, we are getting close to our time to end here, but I would like to ask this question, and maybe it's a bit large for the last couple of minutes here, but one of the things that I've noticed in kind of the civility arena, if you will, you know, both from your book, your website resources, and others also, is that this discussion about civility often includes recommendations about finding balance in one's life. You know, the resources will talk about pursuing spiritual disciplines, getting proper exercise, eating well. In other words, this kind of holistic approach. And I'm just kind of curious if you have any thoughts about why this is, you know, especially as we, again, with the going back to the title of the talk here, we have the election, we have Thanksgiving dinner. It's this, different national thing versus a very
Right.
familial event, and so we have this kind of holistic, it seems to me, approach in the civility movement. Why is that?
So secret number 9 in the book is we are spiritually bound together as we. So at the root of all this is I believe spiritual, and this holistic business is great stuff. Not for everybody, but it's great stuff. I think at the core of it is understanding our own ego and knowing how to exert it when needed and how to subdue it when needed. So it's sort of Islamic, it's the jihad, it's the internal jihad, it's the struggle within to understand ourselves so that we can understand others. People who need to be right all the time, there's probably something behind that. There's some hot buttons there that need to be that get pushed by this need to be right. If we were in a survival game, somebody will end up being a leader, perhaps, but somebody will also come up with some great idea. Who is maybe the quietest one in the group, and that person needs to be included. So,
right.
Sorry.
Well, unfortunately here we have come to the end of our time together, but I do want to thank both Ted and Dr. Green and all of you for joining us for this, what I think is an important conversation. The Bliss Institute and the Greater Akron Civility Center will return with more programming in the new year. And I do want to mention that in the chat section, again, we do have Ted's website listed, Fighting to Understand Us. But I'll also say, I think, Ted, because often on these types of conversations, I don't have time or I forget to jot down the exact web address, but if they type in Ted Wetzel and Fighting to Understand Us into a search engine, that should probably take them to your website, right?
Yeah, you don't need the us, it's .us, so Fighting to Understand. If you type in Fighting to Understand, you'll get to us.
Okay. And that has your book, or the ways that you can get the book. It has all of the resources, also a form to contact you as well. So anybody who wants more information can just go to your website and you'll get the information.
Absolutely, right.
Great. Well, again, I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and a peaceful and relaxing and civil holiday season. Please remember to take time, even among all the stresses and anxiety, especially of this year, to enjoy time with family and friends, whether it's in person or virtual, and to be grateful for all the many blessings that we do have in our lives. And again, thank you to everyone for joining us. We will see you in 2021.
Thank you.